the wrong direction.
I knew when I had somebody at an A&P this time said, TV show, you on TV, right? And I said, yeah. And I went, the juice man.
And a carrot.
Contrary to what many of you find listed in your cable programs in your various cities, we're changing the name. We're listed now under, it mentions that we are the Welcome Wagon Show. But we have now changed it to a band of gypsies. And for those of you who do not take heed, hey Joe, you better watch it. Now the news. For the inner pilot, it's always good flying weather. It's true that lightning and wind bursts are always present. So, for the dedicated flyer, the ever-changing weather conditions become irrelevant. One is either capable of flying or one is not. The reason it is impossible to predict or codify the journeys of the internal space explorers is because they do not and cannot plot a course or file a flight plan beforehand. For the true inner pilot, it's always a good day to fly, and any new direction, a promising one. When one man heard tales of the harsh judicial customs of some cultures, he thought to himself, that's nothing. Just look at life's final treatment of man. It first beheads them and then deports them. One thing about life is that it cannot do things halfway, like certain other creatures we could mention. No component of any machine can work as hard or in a manner as complex as the machine itself. Consider the ramifications of this at the universal level, and also at the one pertinent to the operations of the mind relative to the universal. A man once mused, there's nothing wrong with the mind that, ceasing to expect that which it cannot do from it, wouldn't cure. Leaning his hand on his holstered six-shooter, the gunfighter softly noted, cure is a mighty strong word there, partner. And correct he be, except in light of what life ultimately has in store for you. The difference between the many and the few is that the few will eventually outgrow their clothes. Fashion, fashion, grumbled one man. It always comes down to a question of fashion. A boy asked his father, Papa, why do people keep talking about man's psychology when what they mean is his brain chemistry? What makes them do it? Their brain chemistry, he replied. And the lad slapped himself on the forehead. Oh, I knew that. Being human's not the problem. Believing otherwise is. On one world, everyone is born with a thing they're not supposed to ever look at. But hey, what's the problem? Everyone's born somewhere, and every place has its own conditions, so what's the big deal? The very kind of comment life makes men make to keep them from looking. A man trying to detach his consciousness from the collective flow laughs at the hobby of people attempting to throw the end of a thread through the eye of a needle from a mile away. Although all forms of popular entertainment and education are distractions intended to keep man at his present level, no fault is to be found therewith, for this is exactly what most desire. And should they not, it is possible to turn elsewhere. A boy said to his father, You take all the fun out of being critical. Thanks, bless the old man. The difference in the expense of being one of the many or of the few is that it doesn't cost anything to be dumb and live in the dark. Should note that from the other view of the few, that they are prepared, even anxious, to pay whatever it takes. And their only problem being finding who to pay. Being human's not the problem. Not understanding it is. A mother told her daughter that it was dig-it time, and so commenced. If it is true that no one can help you, then only the grossest of dolts seek help. This notwithstanding the fact that everyone outside this family, it seems, seeks help of some kind. And the girl nodded along to the comment, in that it had a good beat and you could dance to it. Hey, what'd you expect? She's just a child. On one world, everyone is born owning a small plot of land, which proves to be of extreme importance to their existence, but over which they can exercise no control. Apparently. Another bottom line, cut your throat distinction between the struggle for one's own personal consciousness and the common forms of religions, philosophies, and the like, is that the latter activities take the conditions of a man's life to be of significance, whereas in the case of the former, such is of none. It can't be. Or else the effort cannot rise above the very conditions against which it struggles. Some have said that the ordinary do not see this because they do not want to see it. But consider the matter forward. If ordinary men did clearly see the situation, of what use would it be to them? Now this is a more profitable way to ponder it. On one planet, the leading creature's sense of themselves was centered around not the brain, but the kidneys. And the study of themselves was not psychology, but rather renology, which proved no more rewarding than the former. It's almost as though life's game is to say, hey, don't look over here, look over there. Translators' instant analysis. Note that the word almost appears only in the vocabulary of creatures who have language. Those born physically lame are not held responsible for their condition, yet everyone is born mentally motionless and all seek escape from liability. I don't get the connection, said one man as he limped this way. As a mystic lay dying, someone asked what name should be put on his headstone, and he replied, Captain Inert. And they asked why, and he said, because that's what they'll eventually turn me into anyway. And now for what could be the last piece of health news you'll ever need. Its possibility depends not on the material, but the audience. At any rate, here it is. What's possibly the last piece of health news you'll ever need? There is no cure for accepting things as they are. Or the short version, there is no cure for weakness. To himself, a man said, even if thinking about and talking about being more conscious won't get it done, it's still way more fun than thinking about and talking about anything else I know. I guess life may let you get away with at least that much, maybe. Positive or negative follow-up, margin of error plus or minus 2%. Fish can't drown. Not as long as they stay in the water, they can't. Men invented the idea of gods that they could reason and bargain with after realizing life's impersonal attitude toward them. Men may be many things, but being frightened and confused, hiding under the bed when you can concoct a tale that will set you free, is not one of them. And as he softly fingered the hammer of his six-shooter, the gunfighter said, "Set you free is a mighty powerful term there, partner," which indeed it is, until you consider that it is your captor who allowed you to say it. One bone-crushing difference between ordinary men and the few is that even though the ordinary will periodically proclaim that we want out of here, they never aim their interest in the direction of any potential freedom. It's rumored that on one planet, as soon as each creature is born, it looks at itself and exclaims, "Oh no, not that!" Tonight's zoological quiz. How can you distinguish species capable of further development from those who've reached their fullest potential? That's correct, by the fact of their dissatisfaction. Very good. The simple talk about sports and sex. The more sophisticated about wealth and politics. Those dedicated to the struggle for individual consciousness, on the other hand, can't really say much about their interest, in that the act of doing so conflicts therewith. "What a hobby," said the whale to Ahab. "I'm telling you, what a frothing hobby." Those struggling aright to awaken are like a man trying to pull a plug from a wall socket who has the darndest time remembering where the wall is. That should actually read, remembering what the wall is. But I'm sure you get the point. A lad asked his dad, "Why do people, especially those who seem to know the least, roll their eyes around in their head when asked a question they can't answer, as though searching for one? Where do they think they're looking?" And the old man shrugged his shoulders. Which finally the kid realized was a fitting and informative reply. Reminds me we need to make a correction of an item from last time that had to do with a document allegedly stolen from God's secret personal files that noted in there, referred to any man that tries to sell another man on anything. It said that it referred to him, it said originally, as a despicable asshole, and that was not correct. What it was supposed to have said, that in that secret file it referred to such men as pathetic turd rollers. Being human's not the problem. Denying it is. When a visitor to Earth learned that one of the songs most loved and revered by man was entitled "Precious Memories," he thought, how precious. Many who believe themselves interested in things transcendental play with their diet in an attempt, as they see it, to cleanse the body, when what they're really after is to alter their brain chemistry. Too bad there's no specific formula for this. What? If you're so dense yourself as to need further directions along this line, here it is. The way you can tell for absolute certain that someone doesn't know anything is if they try to convince you that they do. There was once an obscure cult who believed that hell is an endless sales pitch. A man named his new horse. To be awake in the land of the sleeping is not a pretty sight. And the first thing it did was throw him into a pile of brambles. After a while, there is only one form of magic, standing still. Everyone has their own personal advisor, in whose interest he acts may not be as simple a question as you think. Tonight's hint: you're closer than normal to seeing the truth about life when you're not looking at anything in particular. Same regarding speaking the truth about it when without comment. According to myth, one part of one man became so sick of the rest of him that it got even sicker of it. And now from our adult novelties catalog comes this free gift which shows if you are a human or a cow by the fact of whether there are people you look up to. Hey, it was free. Only the followers of those who reach enlightenment worry with the problems of vanity and humility. Those who actually achieve this state never have nor need such concerns, impersonally realizing from the beginning and all along the way their lack of having anything to feel vain about. Being human is not the problem. Not facing it is. Okay, look at it this way. There is no problem that can be correctly seen if you're merely human. In the Warrior's Directory, charity is spelled I-M-P-A-R-T-I-A-L-I-T-Y. Only those with a misunderstanding of the quest believe in martyrdom. That is, that those struggling for the extraordinary are liable to be struck down for their efforts. No such thing. Conditions are arranged such that life never has to take action against any specific man for anything he might normally do that would be unacceptably disruptive. It is from being impotent that men dream of their dangerous potential. Each animal is constructed so that it sees only those things which are pertinent to its survival, while men are built able to look at everything and still see nothing. A lion once asked an elephant, "What would happen if you had a contest between man and all the other animals?" And the elephant waited a moment, then said, "Is that it?" "Yeah," replied the lion, "that's it." Moral: it's obviously easy to make fun of a pachyderm if he's riding a tricycle, as he subtly rolled a shiny bullet between his fingers. The gunfighter drawled, "You sure throw the word 'obviously' around there with ease there, partner." Which, no denying it, was the case here. But it still seems of little consequence when you become aware of what kinds of various insulting gestures life has been making in your presence all these years, which you claim never to have noticed. One man told his son, who was interested in the transcendental journey, "You can talk about travel till the trains come home, but if you do, the trains will never come home." Perhaps the largest obstacle in the mind to a man comprehending what the adventure is about is that it is travel that not only has no map, but cannot, which fact alone is sufficient to keep most disinterested. But on a positive side, a story. Every time that Abraham would think that he had busted up the last of the idols, he'd find another one. Well, it's a positive message if you're a dyed in the synthetics of your own making image breaker. To the more conscious, talk is, for better or worse, motion. story that was brought up last time of a warrior who was wounded in battle in the leg, and upon return to camp, due to the intensity of the pain, he had begun to favor his good leg. And soon upon arrival, someone asked him why he was limping. And he said, upon realizing what was going on, said, looking for sympathy, I guess. Let's move that from sympathy and consider what's involved. Perhaps I should crudely make it more obvious. The intent, there is nothing are hidden. Nothing is hidden in these tales of mine. Everything presented is as you would expect. An intense, a bad wound with its inherent intense pain. The wounded man must make it back to his original place of decampment, and by the time he gets there, is favoring his good leg and somewhat, shall we say, distracted by the pain itself. And then he is suddenly brought to his attention by someone asking, just as soon as he walks in, like, why are you limping? The problem is not in acting natural, such as limping with a wounded leg. The problem is not being aware that you are. It is at this point amongst others that people involved with such as this, people who may ever understand anything about life, their perception, their attitude, their take on life goes off on a course that is so diverse from that of the collective that you can't really overstate it, which is why it's normally overstated. The continuing, disturbing discovery by the few is not that they're human, but that they can continually lose all awareness of the fact and engage in the numerous activities, at least 4 of them was mentioned in news items staggered within the readings tonight, about being human is not the problem, denying it is. Being human is not the problem, not facing it is. Being human is not the problem, believing otherwise is. When I said that the course is split and go in such wildly, and different doesn't even cover it. It just goes into, it's not just different directions, it goes into different strata. It goes into almost different dimensions because of such things as. The ordinary would agree with everything that's been said thus far if they followed it. But being ordinary, part of the proof is, part of the evidence, the operational evidence that you are ordinary is that you properly do all the things that I said are not really the problem. That you deny that you're human to varying degrees. People do not think about it in that way, but anyone who claims to be religious, whatever religion they claim to be, are in part denying that they're human. People who believe in help, people who believe outside a clerical venue such as psychology, people who believe that they can be helped and changed are denying their humanity in the sense that being human is not the problem, but believing otherwise is. And they believe that they are something that is malleable. They believe it is something that an outside mortal source, upon which an outside mortal source can affect change. there is a kind of key in all of this that has to do with, I just have to use an ordinary word, is indifference. And I brought it up in several stories of late. One of them had to do with a guy that, after trying to bring his mind under control and after using the several methods that he had discovered or read about, of trying to focus his attention, trying to bring the activity of his mind under some control, and the most common ones always have been, in various models, of attempting to think of only one thing constantly, attempting to hold some idea, some word, some picture, some sound in one's mind, regardless of the passing thoughts through one's mind, or the attempt to directly stop thought and not let anything pass, to freeze it. And after trying all these various methods, he finally came up with his own method that he looked upon all of his thoughts, not excluding the ones that he had tried to use to change his thought processes. And finally looked at him and said, well, to hell with all of you. That was not intended. As you recall, I had a viewer write in the very next time and ask if the man were not intending to say something other than a negative denouncement of all thoughts. And yes, the viewer was correct. Which viewers are always correct if they let me write for them. The indifference is what the man intended by to hell with all of you. And there's a kind of indifference having to do with the kind of weather that's necessary for flight. That the opening story tonight pointed out that to an inner pilot, it's always good flying weather, even though there are continual lightning, bursts of lightning, wind gusts are always present. That being the case, a dedicated flyer must eventually come to the understanding that the conditions are irrelevant. That statement itself is nothing new, because you can find it all the way from public writings supposedly about mysticism to the so-called the theories behind many of the martial arts. And it's even attempted analyzations of mythology in the West of chivalry, or in the East of the samurai approach. The ordinary, it strikes people, quite ordinary people, to hear that there would be some benefit if a man could be, if not totally indifferent, if he could be indifferent in certain ways, in certain areas at certain times. The ordinary, as always, have never taken it past the physical. And there are people throughout history and right now undergoing self-imposed physical rigors in the attempt to render themselves physically indifferent to these unnatural conditions, such as taking off all your clothes and sitting out in the weather, sitting in the snow, trying to stand on one foot, going without with as little food as possible. But let's say sitting out in the snow, sitting out in the elements, and you live in some intemperate, non-tropical climate, and you attempt to sit out there. And you do it as long as you can for stretches of time until you are literally on the verge of death. Or if it's done collectively, someone inside is in charge of coming out and looking at all the would-be mystics sitting out there, and to check on them periodically, and if they are about to meet their great maker, drag them inside and give them a little slapping around or some warm tea. But what are they attempting? And besides just that, as I assume everyone knows, it's nothing new, but now it's considered even non-mystical, that they're kids, youngsters, teenagers, and others taking the so-called martial arts here in the West, and them throwing in what I assume they purport to be some sort of ancient theories behind it. The general approach being, the general verbal approach in the ordinary world, that the martial arts are not just a way to physically overcome your enemy or to hurt someone physically. No, indeed, all that is a reflection of what should be an inner warrior, an inner art of combat wherein you are engaged not in simply physical struggle, which is the crude outward manifestation, but internally you're struggling with your own demons and the evil forces of the world, etc. And it sounds nice. But no one ever gets, the ordinary never gets past the point that this, and tied in with that is that you're supposed to be indifferent. That you've got to learn not only to hurt your enemy, if you must, but to be indifferent to his blows. That you cannot stay involved, that you decide to do whatever it is, you're going to take the guy and suddenly he steps on your toe and you go, "Ow, damn, come on." You can't do that. You have to develop some sort of physical stamina to the point, some kind of control over yourself, that some big bully can come up and go on your toe and you go, "Oh, damn, oh, crap." That's kind of, I'm sure your martial arts school would not be proud of you. So the idea is, the theoretical idea behind the physical activity and the physical discipline is that there should be developing in the student, in the follower of whatever the system or philosophy or martial art is, of some sort of, if they don't use the word indifference, is some sort of resistance, some sort of the ability to steel oneself somewhat from the results and the aspects of pain. Taken just a little bit further, is about as far as they've ever gone, in the East and the West, it's not limited to any one area, is that a true samurai, a true martial arts expert, a true warrior, a true knight, not only would be able to sustain an unusual amount of pain without whining, that even if he got wounded bad enough that he limped, that was the joke, it was a personal joke to the warrior, to himself, if you don't see it as a joke. Is when he was doing this, someone said, "Why are you limping?" And he's suddenly aware of it, and he said, "Well, looking for sympathy, I guess." Because he knew damn well he had no excuse limping, other than the fact he was wounded and was a human. Aha! But what is that for which there is no excuse? That he wasn't aware of it until somebody pointed out, "Why are you limping?" And then suddenly he was aware of it. So if there was any sympathy deserved, we're getting very inside of it now, if there's any sympathy deserved, sympathy with a whole bunch of quotation marks, it was for the warrior to realize to himself, "You dumbass mother so-and-so. I mean, just because your leg is wounded, you're limping, it's okay. But you dumb son of a bitch, you weren't even aware until somebody said, 'Why are you limping?'" For that, he deserves some sympathy. That is, I'm as big a dumbass as I was 40 years ago, or I can be. It is quite possible. I can do it, and there's the proof of it. What I was going to say is, even beyond the aspect of direct physical pain and the various codes of chivalrous conduct, East and West, has also been at least, usually, some urging that one be able to develop a certain kind of less than totally physically based assaults, to develop some resistance to those which are less than totally physically based assaults. That is, thank God, that is, that they can resist insults, that a true warrior can truly resist physically, or he's supposed to. That somebody comes up and steps on his toe, and he gets such a whine that he has to go call his mother or call his liege and ask for them to send out a royal soother to kiss his toe. Now, you're supposed to be beyond that. Just a little bit, apparently, higher is the urging, philosophically at least, in all of these activities, that a man be able to resist a non-physical assault. That a true warrior, if someone comes up and says, "Boy, you dress funny," Where'd you guys get that crummy looking flag? Or just, I've never seen a knight with a nose the size of yours. What kind of martial artiste, what sort of warrior, what sort of knight, what sort of samurai can stand there and resist somebody coming by and kicking him, or somebody bumping into him, even somebody giving him his best shot? He can stand there and take it, at least not whine, and then, by the time you're proud of him, somebody ride by on a fast bicycle and look at him and go, na 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 na, and he gets very upset. All of this still misses it, however. I went to that to give ordinary people a little credit. They still sense, as always, the information is there in the genetics of man in general, that there is more to the idea of indifference than just indifference to physical effects. Because they even will take it as far, when I point out, take it as far to areas that are not overtly physical, such as insults. But it never goes any further than that. And people do not even, as a rule, even those actively involved in some sort of activity, such as martial arts or even various Zen, Sufi, Tibetan schools of mysticism, wherein they're attempting to develop the ability to resist the conditions of life, no one ever claims that they even get to the point to easily, to handily resist that second level, that is, of personal insults, non-physical assaults. That is always seen as, well, that's something beyond me. That's something only Buddha, something only an absolutely awakened, enlightened, liberated man could do, because we're only human. All we can do is work on it and pray for grace. Well, when you live in the Himalayas by yourself with a whole bunch of other men, you'll pray for a lot of things. But the indifference is never seen in the way in which I'm going to point it out. It's just not part of the collective perception of man. It's not even speculated upon. It does not even follow into the theoretical mystical discussions that are publicly available. And that is the absolute non-physical, insofar as comparing the two, form of, or indifference to a form that is absolutely non-physical. It is not the indifference to the physical assaults from without, from other people. It is not even resistance. It's not limited to the resistance of the non-physical assaults from without, that is, insults. It is the indifference to thought. Not thought out there, but the indifference to the thinking in here. That is the ultimate form of indifference. That is, I might suggest, perhaps the ultimate form of the method of trying to, not the achievement of being conscious with no thought, but I suggest to you it might be perhaps the ultimate struggle. It has all sorts of positives that would lend itself to being considered perhaps the supreme form. One thing, it's simple as hell. It cuts down on trying to remember what it is you're trying to think about. It cuts down on becoming identified in some way, entangled. If you had picked up a method that, which all of these understand are based on the same thing and are not totally worthless. They can be used, but let us say that you adopted the one of trying to remember the blessed name of Jesus, or trying to picture at all times the benevolent face of Muhammad. It is almost inevitable that a person get entangled with their thinking. Not anything supernatural, but they become entangled in their thinking regarding whatever it is they're trying to think about. Like, why did I pick Jesus? Or why did the group that I joined up with, why did they